Welcome back. Today, I want to talk to you about the real journey of leadership, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. And I want to lean into a topic that almost every leader I've ever worked with, coached, or walked alongside has struggled with: imposter syndrome. That quiet voice in your head that says, you're not ready, you're not qualified, or you don't belong here, you don't actually know what you're doing. And here's the thing: it doesn't matter how experienced you are, how many titles that you've held, how many achievements that you've racked up, how many degrees you have. That little voice has a way of showing up at the most inconvenient moments. And I am right there with you. So, in this episode, we're going to unpack what imposter syndrome actually is and why it shows up most often in leaders and how it sneaks into our leadership in the most subtle ways. And I want to talk to you about the difference between healthy humility and destructive self-doubt, and most importantly, how to reframe imposter syndrome into self-leadership. Because the truth is, imposter syndrome doesn't actually have to disqualify you. In fact, if you handle it the right way, it can become a signal that points you toward your next level of growth. So if we think about what imposter syndrome really is, let's start with a definition. It's persistent belief that your success is a fluke, that you've somehow tricked people into thinking that you're more competent than you really are, and that sooner or later you're going to be found out. It's not just insecurity, it's a distortion. It's the gap between your internal perception and your external reality. And the interesting thing is, imposter syndrome shows up most often in high achievers, the people who are constantly stretching and constantly growing and operating at the edge of their competence. So if you've ever felt this way, the chances are it's not because you're failing. It's because you're playing in spaces that challenge you. And that's exactly what leaders are supposed to do. So you know that you're likely in the right place. So why do we feel it more as leaders? Why does imposter syndrome show up so strongly when we're in leadership? First of all, leadership is inherently visible. You're not just doing your job, you're doing it in front of other people. Your decisions are evaluated, your words are quoted, your performance is scrutinized, and that visibility can magnify every doubt. And leadership involves constant decision making in areas where you don't always have the answers. That can trigger the feeling of, I'm making this up as I go. And thirdly, leadership often comes with rapid promotions or opportunities that maybe you didn't expect. So you step into a new role and suddenly you're thinking, wait, who decided that I was ready for this, even though you might have been the one to fight for this? And to add to that, the weight of the representation, whether it's being the first woman in the room, or maybe the youngest leader on the team, or maybe this is your first time having this title, or the only person of your background at the table, or maybe your degree isn't as fancy as everybody else's, and imposter syndrome can feel like it's amplified through a megaphone. So if we step back for a second and just think about the cost of imposter syndrome, what happens when we let imposter syndrome run unchecked? There's three major problems. Number one, overcompensation. You work harder than everyone else, not because it's sustainable, because you're trying to prove that you belong. That can quickly slide into burnout. The second would be hesitation. You second guess yourself, you hold back your ideas, or delay decisions because you're afraid of being wrong, and that slows down your leadership and your team and your productivity. And the third is isolation. You feel like you can't admit your doubts to anyone else because that might expose you. So you carry the weight alone, and that loneliness compounds the problem. The cost isn't just personal. Teams suffer when leaders lead from fear instead of confidence. Culture suffers when people hesitate instead of innovate. And that's why reframing imposter syndrome is so crucial. So if we think about myths of confidence, one of the reasons imposter syndrome sticks around is because we've bought into some of the myths about confidence. Myth number one: confident leaders never feel doubt. And the truth is, the most effective leaders still feel the doubt. They just persevere past it. They just don't let it drive their decisions. And myth number 2, you have to fix yourself before you can lead. The truth is, leadership isn't about perfection. It's about progress. If you're waiting until you feel 100% ready, you'll never step forward. And myth number 3, everyone else has it together. That's just not true. The grass is never greener on the other side, most cases. The more leaders that I talk to, the more I realize everyone is figuring it out as they go. This is life. There was no instruction manual for this. And the difference is some just admit it and some just hide it or suppress it and stick it under a rug. So let's stop believing that doubt means disqualification. Doubt just means that you're human. So if we look at reframing imposter syndrome, here's where the shift happens. Instead of seeing imposter syndrome as a sign that you're unqualified, I want you to reframe it as a signal. It's telling you one of 3 things. Number 1, that you're growing. If you feel like an imposter, it's usually because you've stepped into a space that you have not mastered yet. And that's not failure, that's growth. And number 2, you're invested. You care enough to question whether you're good enough. And that means that you're not coasting. You actually care about doing a good job. So kudos to you. And number 3, you're called higher. Sometimes imposter feelings point to the gap between who you are today and who you're becoming. And that's an invitation to step into the growth with intentionality. When you see that imposter syndrome as a growth signal, you'll stop fighting it and you'll just start using it to your advantage. So if we have some practical tools we can talk about to reframe this, how do we actually reframe imposter syndrome into self-leadership? And I got 5 tools for you. Number 1, name it. When that thought comes up, like, I am not qualified for this, just say to yourself, that's imposter syndrome talking, and simply name it gives you that distance. Tool number 2 I want to share is check the evidence. Write down your accomplishments, your qualifications, the things that you've led and achieved. Facts anchor when you have those feelings that mislead you. And tool number 3 is separate confidence from competence. You don't have to feel confident to be competent. You can still do excellent work even when the emotions aren't aligned. And tool number 4, speak it out loud. Share your doubts with a mentor or a coach or trusted peer. You'll often discover that they've felt the same thing before, and just saying it breaks its power. And tool number 5, reframe the question. Instead of asking, am I good enough for this role? Ask, what can I learn here that will make me a better leader? Curiosity disarms fear. And healthy humility, if we talk about this versus self-doubt and what the differences are, I want to make an important distinction. Humility and self-doubt can look very similar, but they're not the same. Humility is going to say, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn and grow. And self-doubt says, I don't know anything and therefore I shouldn't be here. So humility opens the doors and self-doubt is going to shut them. And it's important to embrace that humility while rejecting that lie of unworthiness. Because the power of self-leadership at its core, because here's the reality, you can't always control when imposter thoughts show up, but you can control how you respond. So self-leadership means that you don't let emotions drive the car. You let values and vision and truth drive that car. Your emotions can ride along, but they don't get to steer. It also means developing habits that anchor you, like a morning routine that grounds you before the day begins, or reflection practices that remind you of what's true, or a support system that speaks life into you when you can't find it yourself. When you practice self-leadership, imposter syndrome doesn't disappear, but it loses its grip. So I want to just share a personal story with you. There was a new season where I was stepping into a new leadership role, and every day I walked into meetings thinking, any minute now, they're going to realize I don't belong here, and I would be over-prepared. I would triple check everything, cross the T's, dot the I's. I would, spend the extra time making sure that nobody could question my work or my suggestions, and I just still felt like a fraud. And so I had to go through processing my own thoughts, feelings, and emotions and remind myself that there is a reason why they chose me for this position, because I came across confident and educated and skilled enough that they felt that I was qualified for this position. And so I better get my butt in gear and believe in myself the way that they believed in me, and have more faith in myself that I can do this, because they've only seen the icing on the top, the frosting on top of the cake for what I can provide. They haven't even seen all the skills and tools and action that I can provide here. And so really, if anybody should be believing in me, it should be me. So here's my challenge for you. Next time imposter syndrome whispers in your ear, pause and ask, what is this really telling me? Is it telling me that I'm growing? Is it reminding me that I care? Is it inviting me to level up? And choose to see it not as a stop sign, but as a signal. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need leaders who feel flawless. It needs authentic leaders who are honest and resilient and willing to grow in public. You don't need to eliminate imposter syndrome in order to be effective. You just need to be able to reframe it and channel it into self-leadership and grow and become the best version of you that you know you're capable of being. So the next time self-doubt shows up, instead of shrinking back, let it sharpen you. Let it remind you to prepare and to stay humble and to keep learning. That's how you turn imposter syndrome into fuel for your leadership journey. So thank you so much for tuning in today. If this encouraged you, share it with another leader who may be able to just use this as a good reminder. And if you're ready to take your leadership deeper, I'd love to connect with you through coaching and resources or our leadership community. So until next time, lead with courage, lead with humility, and never forget that you belong in this room.